Brilliant. So many of you know me. I'm not going to spend very long on this, but basically, my name is Lucinda. My background is corporate learning and development. And of course, in terms of this, what we're talking about actually appraisals and how we can rethink them and what we want to do to freshen them up, then this is something that I've done myself within my professional career. And because we have a software solution, Actus, which is all about performance management, for many years, we've worked with customers who have different approaches, or they want to use performance management for maybe culture change. They want to do something different. And this is something that we can all think about in terms of just keeping our HR processes fresh. It's always worth taking a step back and thinking, what is the purpose of this performance management process? And we'll look at that and thinking, is it therefore geared up either structurally or even from a language point of view? Is it geared up to support us in achieving what we want to achieve? One of the benefits of Actus is that it is highly, highly configurable. So that's one of the things we can work with clients to align it, to brand it, to adapt it from a system point of view to support what people want to do. But really, really importantly, a lot of it's about how you message it from your organizational point of view. So the learning outcomes that we're going to think about on this particular session are, what are your current appraisal challenges? What is it that you want to achieve in your appraisal challenge? Sort of bring this here. We'll also think about what is the purpose of appraisal or performance management within your organisation, and what's the culture, because that will make a difference. We'll refer to the evidence around performance, high performance, and as ever, I'll aim to give you practical examples and tips, and I'll try and make them as relevant to your situation. If you ask any questions during the chat, really happy to talk about those as well. Now, so one of the things I was going to say, I was going to put a poll up for you, which is one of these here, just to find out how appraisals are working within your organisation. So there you've got, our appraisals alive and kicking in your organisation. I'll give you the opportunity just to answer that as you see fit. It's a single choice one, but feel free to put some context in the chat if it isn't something that's so clear for you. So obviously we're thinking about this. Now, of course, we've been in the appraisal business at scarily 15 years, and it does feel that people, certainly since 2012, there's always kind of complaints about the appraisal process. But it is interesting when you unpick it as to what the cause of those complaints are, as to whether it's actually about the process or how it's being managed. But if you hear where you've had challenges, so I know that there's a number of people that we work with who have different challenges there. What sort of things you find are issues with your appraisal process that you would like to sort of think about here? Or are you thinking of redesigning your appraisal process? And if so, why? So feel free to enter information in the chat. I'm going to have got 81% of people have managed to participate in the poll. What's it gone to 78? Don't know how that happens. Maybe one more person must have joined actually. A new start. Anyone else want to answer the poll, feel free. And also, while I'm sharing the poll, I'm giving you an opportunity. If you've had issues with appraisals or have existing issues with appraisals, what might they be? Feel free to put in the chat. Yes, Steve, I'm really glad you said that, because we work with you. But it's a journey for you at the RSPCA, wasn't it? And one of the really interesting things about some organisations, if you're a charity or if you're the NHS or if you're a private sector, you've got different limitations and cultural aspects. So you need to make sure it works for your culture and organisation. That's interesting. Yeah, Claire. So sometimes it can be overly specific and therefore it's almost too narrow. So if you make it more open to allow more conversation, you can be too prescriptive in appraisals. Alongside monthly supervision, it can feel repetitive. What industry is it you're doing monthly supervision, Laura? And again, that's interesting. So if you're going to do something monthly, or is it quarterly? What's the frequency you're talking about? And you're looking at something fresh. Okay, so this is perfect for you, Hazel, as well, because you can listen to other people's experiences here. So what's interesting is, let me share the results, that in terms of people on this call, you are still doing appraisals. It's still an established annual process. It's supported by regular one-to-ones. So it's something which is, so that is more of a continuous management approach, but you've still got appraisal in place. A chunk of you are going, yes, but you want to change. So that'd be interesting. Why do you want to change? What do you want to change to? What's the problem? We'll ask that later, or feel free to chat now. and some have ditched for ongoing check-ins. Right. Okay. So it's a very regulated thing in terms of supervision. So it's almost like you want to incorporate it because supervision, yeah, I suppose I don't know too. I don't go down a rabbit hole, but Laura, but it's interesting as to is there something where you could align appraisal and supervision in terms of that? Could that replace part of it? Because I can see why it would feel repetitive and actually looking after doing your job in a safe way, which is what supervision is usually about, is a key part of performance, isn't it? So it almost feels like it should be part of the same process, doesn't it? Which is why maybe you're finding it repetitive. So let's have a little look about this. So the sort of things that you do here in terms of complaints, and actually you've given some really fresh ones in terms of the overall process, why so many people criticise the old style once a year annual appraisal or once or twice a year, is that it can be seen as being too backwards looking. So it's all about what we've done before as opposed to looking forwards. The other challenge can be is, does it culminate in anything? Now, I'm finding fewer and fewer businesses, maybe outside of things like financial services, are doing performance-related pay. But does it culminate in something where there's some development that comes out of it, or talent management? Are there any processes that reinforce the effort and time that people have put into having that appraisal? Is it purposeful? One of the main things is the fact that where line managers are just going through the motions, people have a bad experience. They don't feel valued, and that's the cut and thrust of it is less about the process. It's more about how it might be managed, or maybe it's too disjointed, so it's not relevant to day to day. Or I think that's a bit like that supervision one, is it's kind of running alongside something else, which is maybe doing the same thing, so it feels repetitive. So I could see that that would also be the case. Yeah, so exactly, Sarah. So that's the thing. Charities is a charity on here, so you can't do that. So sometimes what you have to think about is how can we motivate managers to treat this as a quality test. It's about employee engagement and what can we do as a result of doing this process. So what can it be to make it worthwhile? It's the so what factor, right? Because if people feel that there is no so what in terms of the appraisal, they go through the motions. And therefore, if a manager is obviously going through the motions, and they're not seeing how important this role is in terms of getting the best out of people, out of showing people that you value them, which is so important in charities where, and other areas where you can't really reward financially, is about doing the right thing and the purpose aspects of it. So how can we really make sure that the process goes up, but the people, the managers in particular, understand that it's about valuing staff. It actually is something that delivers value, but only if the managers realise that, how important their role is in terms of engaging people. So I said that I'd talk about an evidence-based approach. The reality is this is evidence from about 10 years ago now. Michael West did studies where showed that in terms of employee engagement, and I'm sure everyone here knows how important employee engagement is, it correlates with performance and productivity and retention, and lower health and safety incidents and customer satisfaction. So employee engagement, the extent to which people feel engaged within the organisation to go the extra mile, it absolutely varies depending on how the appraisal is completed. And what this graph is showing you, that in certain circumstances, this was in healthcare, that no appraisal was actually slightly better than people having a poor appraisal. So this whole point is that line managers really need to understand what a good quality appraisal is. And the good quality appraisal is, you can get away with if the questions aren't ideal, I guess, Claire, or better to make them open, because in some ways, if you've got something which is really obviously irrelevant, then people don't feel valued. But if you've got the right questions, open questions, where the manager is really partnering with the individual, understanding how they've got on, using coaching skills, and then taking it, future pacing it, that's a good quality appraisal where the individual feels valued, the line managers providing good quality feedback, they're listening to them, they're making it really relevant. That is engaging, whether or not there's anything comes out of it at the end. But something where the manager's going, oh, I've just got to answer this question, tick box, tick box, tick box. Oh, these questions, ignore that one, that's not relevant. Then actually that's more disengaging than them not bothering at all. And that's quite sobering to be aware of that. So it's so important. So we need to remember that actually we do want to have some form of appraisal. It's how it is carried out which makes all the difference. And where people criticise it, the issue really is less about the process and more about the way it's delivered. And this comes down to the skills and motivations of your line managers. Now, you could argue, and actually I can see that one person here has moved for ongoing check-ins, but I'm seeing more of you have got an established annual process supported by one-to-ones. That's what I'm seeing as more of, and I'll explain why that is in a moment. But I think certainly there was a point when people went, oh, ditch the annual appraisal. It's kind of I think it was trendy. I'm not really sure it actually happened that much in practice. And one of the reasons why you can't just ditch it, or I don't think you can just ditch it, is that if you go, oh no, we're just going to regular check-ins, then what you're going to say to these managers, and these could be managers that weren't doing good quality, appraisals in the first place, then fine, don't worry about that. You don't have to do the appraisal. I know you hate it. Just do continuous check-ins. Now, I know I've got lots of experienced HR people. Let's just put common sense. If you're a manager who's not motivated to do an annual appraisal or not motivated to do one in a quality fashion, you're not going to be any more motivated to carry out a quality check-in. And call me a control freak, I could be, but my experience when I was in an organization is if you say go off and just do something, okay, there are a few really diligent people. And in fact, I'm probably thinking about myself here as well. If you told me to just go off and do something and I didn't really see the point, I'd just ignore it. And that's the reality. So you'll go from having at least something happening once or twice a year to having some people doing it diligently and a whole chunk of people not doing anything at all. So I believe it's really important, and this fits with change management. I do stuff on change management. Individuals need to have clarity about what's expected. So go forth and do continuous check-ins isn't really clarity. I still think you need to have some sort of structure where people understand what's expected of them throughout the year and what good looks like throughout the year. And that's the key. So maybe it's slightly less trendy than it was saying just do continuous check-ins, but actually making sure that there's some structure and some quality to those check-ins is important in my experience. And why is that? And what do you want to do? Well, you want to make sure if you're going to do any sort of continuous conversation, you want to make sure that people have got clear goals and they are receiving regular feedback. So this is the other bit of evidence about how performance works, or what actually drives high performance. And this, I think this was like 2006, but this, if you look back through, we did a research review about the last 50 years of performance management evidence and studies and things, and quality goal setting with quality feedback. And by quality feedback, that doesn't just mean saying, oh, well done, good job. It's about specific feedback from the line manager, talking to the individual about what they're doing well and what they could do even better. So taking a personal interest in somebody and helping them to improve. That is the most important thing people can do for an employee engagement. So if you have got line managers and going, okay, we've set our goals at the start of the year and we're having continuous check-ins where we look at the goals and I give you specific feedback, do you know what? Great, that may well work. But if the continuous check-ins are, okay, let's just have a quick catch up. Oh, what have you done? What have you done? Or fine. If it's all very tactical, then that serves a purpose as a one-to-one, but you're not really going to help drive engagement or ongoing performance. So remembering those things, whatever you move to, if you move to something, underpinning it, if you want it to be a high performance process, whatever the structure of it, you need to make sure that people do have clear, smart goals. Managers have the capability, inclination, and skills to deliver good feedback, as in good quality, specific feedback. And you want to make sure that it's done in a purposeful way, where it's clear from the line manager that they see it as something of value. And by seeing it as an exercise that has value, that infers that they value their people. And the opposite is also true. So let's have a look here. So in terms of, this was one I did, one of the, we've done this before. So really similar, actually more of you got an annual process who are on this one, but certainly supported by regular one-to-ones. So the reality is the majority of people are still doing appraisal in some way, shape or form. So the challenges, as I alluded to earlier, if you did want to just move to a pure check-in culture, you need to check that something happens. So will they actually happen? Are you being specific about it? How do you monitor or understand if the interactions are of quality? How are you going to make sure people have goals, given we know how important those are in terms of high performance? How do you get the balance between people just being tactical and going through a to-do list as opposed to thinking, where are we going? Are we making progress over the course of the year? And if you do have reward or talent processes, where you might want to look at people getting specific development or succession planning, how do you manage those if it's a kind of, just an organic check-in? So just thinking about those are the things that you need to overcome if you're looking to move to pure check-in. The evidence in terms of what actually drives performance, and we'll send out this research review to you. Some of you might have seen it before. It assimilates the last 50 odd years of performance evidence, the sort of things. It also talks about other things that I won't go into here, about things like transparent processes, whether your leaders are the behavior of the managers and leaders in the organization. But I've already said clear objectives and regular feedback are very important. Here's a little bit about ratings. Now, I know it's not necessarily relevant to those of you who are in charities or aren't in charities, although certainly I was involved in the conversation with one of the people on here, one of the customers on here, that to do with this. And there was an idea that they wanted to do performance-related pay, but then they realised that maybe it wasn't the right thing for the culture. But you can still put ratings in place if you want to. And they did a rating which was about saying, are you on track or off track? So the benefit of having some ratings is that it's encouraging line managers to be really clear as to whether somebody is performing. So if you want to create a high performance culture, you might want to have some form of rating, but it's not necessarily about pushing people into boxes, because then there's an expectation it might link to reward, and that can be contentious. It takes quite a mature culture to be able to go towards performance related pay. And as I said earlier, not everyone's ready for that, and it's actually not necessarily the right thing for every culture either. There's often other purposes that you want to think about. But the other research, which I thought was quite interesting, that came out from the CIPD a few years ago, the article is called Could Do Better. They illustrated that if you are carrying out a performance rating, if you put performance ratings in place and you're asking people to respond against them, if they think it links to reward or it's going to have consequences for the person that they're rating, they are less likely to be open and honest about what they really think than if they think it's developmental. So if you're doing 360 feedback, where you know that this is actually helping that person, it's part of their leadership development program, so you want to be honest because it's going to help them improve, then people are more honest. But they found that if they thought it might have consequences for the individual, then they were less honest, as in they were nicer to it. The other thing is, when you look at the managers, the same sort of concept is managers were more honest in developmental feedback than they were with performance ratings, and it becomes quite contentious and challenging. So this didn't necessarily come from the research, but this is my suggestion, is that if you are going to do some sort of rating, then it's actually better to split out performance and development conversations on this basis. And the model that we recommend that some of our clients use actually does do that. And this is giving you the rationale for it. But before I go there, if you're thinking about adapting your performance management process, think about the current context. So what is it about your current situation within your organization, and do you, or why do you want to change it? And if you've already got an appraisal process or system in place, what is it that does or doesn't work about it? So Claire put in there earlier that actually the issue with the form was so specific that it wasn't relevant for some people. Well, you can have different forms for different groups, or you can adapt something to be more general for everybody. It could be, it's really what problem are you trying to fix? And again, in terms of those, seeing anyone's got any sort of suggestions of problems that you might want to fix within your organization, maybe here just for general knowledge. But I've had it where people might say, well, actually, we want people to be a bit more entrepreneurial, or we want it to be more forward-looking. And I've worked with clients where we go, we could probably just tweak the process and rebrand it. So they moved the language from being an end of year review to being an achievement conversation. So subtle, it's the same sort of thing, but what that was really inferring, if you said, let's have our achievement conversation, that's talking more about performance and yeah, what you have achieved. So it feels more positive in future, whereas an end of year review feels a little bit more passive, in my opinion. So think about your organization. What is it you're trying to change? Is it really the whole process, or is it just a little bit of a language or a branding tweak that will freshen the whole thing up, that will give a new emphasis? And so that's what I'm saying. Think about what you've got. Is it actually broken, or what is it that needs to happen? If it is the case that people are just not doing it, well, that's a cultural problem, or it's even possibly an HR sort of impetus problem. So I've worked with organizations where things aren't happening. That's because maybe the HR team are focused on something else. They've never been clear about the expectations around when something should be completed, what good looks like, and there's no consequences when people don't do it. And you know what? If people think, oh, I don't really like doing appraisals, but no one says anything if I haven't done it, then you're just reinforcing that lack of compliance with the process. And I understand I use the word compliance. You don't really want it to be a compliance thing. You want people to buy into it and see why it's important. So you want to have lots of positive messaging about this is about engaging people. This is about high quality goals, good quality conversations. We're going to give our line managers the right skills. You could recognize the managers that do a great job. So you can create a whole lot of positive noise around the process, which is going to push it in a positive way, or you can do nothing and let people complain about it and just then chase them for compliance, which makes it more of a negative spiral. Hopefully you can see the difference. So think about what is the issue that you're trying to fix. And I suspect almost always the issue will be with the way the process is being managed or being rolled out or hasn't been rolled out, the fact there's no consequences, it may be cultural. So think about just subtle tweaks that you can make to help get the process fixed. You don't necessarily have to throw the whole thing out. Okay, yes, so that's quite a common one. So at least it's saying where you have people where sometimes organizations where certain people don't want, it's not aspirational, then they don't have the aspirations to progress and they already have meetings with their managers, and that's how they've got housekeeping stuff. So there is, again, it could be horses for courses. We used to work with the royal household and the gardeners and things like that. They don't necessarily need, if you're housekeeping stuff and it's a part of a team and it's very much of a sort of show up and do the job, then they could have a very, very simple appraisal form that's very light touch, but there's just a regular conversation. Whereas the people who are the thought leaders or project managers or hold really quite important roles within your organization, leadership roles, maybe where they're taking the organization forwards, well, they definitely need goals. And you need to apply your process, to them. And so it doesn't have to be one size fits all necessarily. I mean, you don't want to overcomplicate it either. But yeah, it is something there to think about getting it to be relevant. I made Elisa's comment. So the appraisal meeting is a third-party platform that companies are break trading. Okay. Yeah. Lisa, that is a great example of where the process starts to almost become so over-engineered that people are spending more time filling out the forms and less time having the conversation, and then it becomes a bit cynical, negative, and obviously it looks like you have to do it because it's got a link to a grading and a performance related pay piece. So yeah, that is quite tricky, and then people become quite cynical. So you almost get backward momentum in my experience on those sort of things. So yeah, that's good. So re-establishing something about more about a positive future momentum, more about the people. How can you make it linked to positive benefits in your organization, whether it's development or career as well, which people buy into in terms of this. Lisa, if I probably would need to go into more detail if you want to talk further about that. It looks you are trying to change something, so message me if you do want to have a chat about something like that. But yeah, that is a really good example of where you have these things, they become so complicated, the process almost eats itself, and then it does become a little bit more kind of tricky to manage. So and maybe this is a question to start with, therefore, and it can be tricky if you've got more than one purpose. So what is the purpose of your process? And there can be other purposes, by the way. It's just that these are the ones that are most common, in my opinion. For example, are you trying to create a high performance culture? And so therefore you choose different things according to whichever that is. Do you need to align reward, gradings, etc., or bonus in some way? What's the purpose there? Those two are not that dissimilar. It's just you may or may not have ratings in there, and it depends on how detailed you need to do and how complex it is. And so they can become a bit tricky. High performance, if you just wanted purely to drive a high performance culture, then it's really about getting really good, smart objectives. I think Barry put there, absolutely smart, realistic objectives, and get people really focused on what good looks like, and ideally getting the individuals to own them. So it's a performance oriented culture. Now, there is something about giving people reward at some point, but if your organization doesn't already have that established, you can't really go from zero to sensibly aligning reward with performance overnight or even in 1 year. I say that's like a 2-3 year thing to do properly, because you need to have ratings potentially and calibration. But that doesn't mean you can't focus on high performance about everyone being about, if they're inspired because your organization is trying to do the best it can do. So as a charity, you want to do the best for, your whatever your charity is about. You want to achieve the best, be the most productive, be the most efficient. So spend your money most wisely. You can still be high performance as a charity. The key is about how you reward against that. And I use reward as in reward doesn't have to be financial. So how do we recognize those people who are the top performers? Could you put in place sort of champions recognition schemes, shout outs for people, just real focus on, oh, look what we've achieved together. We've managed to save more animals, or, raise more money for the elderly, whatever it might be that we're able to do, we're here to do. So high performance in a purpose-led environment, think of the NHS, people want to do the best they can, but you have to get them focused in on performance. Now, the other area, of course, which is somewhere a link to that, is employee engagement. And that's, you're not going to lose if you make it about employee engagement, because you want to make sure that people feel valued. Then hopefully they want to deliver their best. They want to deliver their most performance. They want to therefore stay. So engagement is about, just generally a very human oriented appraisal, where people hopefully feel that they want to do the best every day because they feel valued. And then aligned to that, maybe you're in an organization where it's really tricky to retain people. And so could you think about development or career opportunities? So if you think about the Gallup questions, it is engagement. People say, have you got the opportunity to grow? So giving them those sort of things, putting in place things. And again, it doesn't have to cost lots of money. You just need to be a bit creative if you're in a small organization. So what can you do there to help retain people, make them feel they're learning? What can they learn? How can they share things? So you could do things like lunch and learns. You get someone to go on a webinar and share that information back with the team, and you recognize them for doing that. So it doesn't have to be costly, but it does require you to be a little bit creative and to recognize that that's going on. So think about what the purpose or purposes of your process might be, and there might be something totally different, and make sure the way you structure it is about that. So if it's about performance, you're going to make sure people have got goals, right? If it's about reward, you're going to need to rate almost certainly. If it's about employee engagement, you need to make sure there's a frequency that goes on and it has an opportunity to recognize people and to help them to learn and grow. So you need to make sure that there is a formal opportunity for people to have development, depending on what that purpose is. So make sure your process, sounds common sense, supports the purpose that you think it needs to have. Of course, it does make a difference in terms of the culture or the leaders that you have and whether they are supporting that. You need them to buy into that purpose and lead by example and model those behaviours. So then go to any sort of change that I've talked about there in terms of culture change. You need to be able to call out managers. If you've got leaders in your organisation who are not modelling the right behaviours or kind of dissing it, then you need to have the opportunity to get them to buy in if you're trying to relaunch something. So then on to the model that a number of people use that we work with, or a variation on this. And this is a simple way of breaking up that old-fashioned 3-hour epic end of year that I remember many years ago into more of a continuous check-in type process, but hopefully giving you the best of both worlds. Now, you can tweak this to make it more performance driven or to make it more career driven. But the idea here is you are going to continuous conversations, but unlike your idea of saying just go off and do continuous conversations, you're giving each of those quarterly check-ins an area of focus. And that gives managers clarity, but also really importantly, it gives you a time frame for certain things to happen in the organization. And that means that you can run your career aspiration, your talent management activities at the end of month 9, because you've got there in there. You can talk about development at the end of quarter 1, month 3. The benefit of looking at development then is that potentially you could put that development in place with those people, as presuming you can get access to what it is that they need, and you could help them put that development in place and still, within this business year, which means they're going to be more, they're going to be higher performers. I always remember, old school appraisals you would have, and I remember an NHS one which had 10 pages, but it wasn't that dissimilar to mine when I worked in corporates. It was really long and it covered everything. So it was objectives, it had competencies, it talked about your development, and it talked about what you wanted to do from a career point of view. And by the time you got to that career questions, both you and your manager have lost the will to live, frankly. So it's a kind of like whatever, and it's not really the quality conversation that you actually want. Plus, if you've put development in at the end of the year, well, let's be honest, really, it's only going to help you next year. What you really want to do is have development, especially in these fast moving times. Development needs to come in at a time when it's going to help you be successful. So now we can't wait. We shouldn't be waiting 9, 12 months for that. That's very old fashioned. We should be able to organically, ongoing, people should be developing all the time. So we should be able to help them to do that. And again, it doesn't have to be formal training. So this is the sort of model that I was sort of suggesting, is that you set those objectives at the start of the year. And if it's coming to the end of a previous one, so you finish off last year with your appraisal and you set objectives next year. You then should have regular one-to-ones, which are just sort of the ad hoc, how are things going? That's where you can do your transactional stuff. But we're suggesting that at the end of the quarter 1, have something. I'll come back to that. Yes, yes, I would say that, Hazel. I would say definitely do combine them. I think it's more natural if you actually sit down and have that end of year appraisal. You are looking back, so it really is logical to go. So that's how you've done last year, right? Where do we take that next year? Because you're probably going to carry some objectives over. There'll be some learnings. What's relevant next year? So yes, I absolutely would say you combine that. In terms of the meatiness of them, if you can follow this process throughout the year, by having development earlier and then having a mid-year appraisal, I'll go through each of those, you can reduce the meatiness of that month 12 one, because you've been talking all year round. And that's why it becomes so epic, because you're talking about everything in one go. Whereas if we can get managers to talk about things, and if you use a system like Actus, you can capture all that data through the year. So when you get to the end of the year appraisal, a good chunk of it's been done. So yes, absolutely good question. So at the end of quarter 1, I'm suggesting you should be having a one-to-one going, right, how am I on track with my objectives or not? In fact, here I've got a separate slide on this. Am I on track? And actually, what help do I need? Let's make sure, are there any development needs that I need to help me meet my objectives? If you've got a system and you're going to manage them centrally, then you should be able to pull those development needs at the same time. Absolutely, Bali, I think this, if you can push down the ownership very much so, particularly with development as well, it's their development. So we want people to be empowered to decide what they need and to own it. And that's one thing I also think is quite key, to make sure that people are doing that, to own their development there, and they're actually it's taking them forwards, and that tells you a lot as a line manager or some L&D as to how motivated that person is in terms of these things. So they're seeing the purpose of the training as well. That's the thing, is this training is going to help you achieve this year. That's why it sits there. So let's get it in place. Let's do that learning now. And then remember, we're in an there's places people can teach themselves stuff through AI. There's online stuff. There's so little formal development, or a lot less formal development needs to be managed centrally. So people need to be empowered to take responsibility for it. And it's interesting to see who is and isn't, because they're the ones you want to really keep in your business. So month 6 is your mid-year appraisal. Now, if you are doing ratings, if you are doing performance-related pay, I think this is such an important thing to do in terms of at the mid-year point, line manager, if you are going to have a rating, the line manager, so we've talked about the earlier on track on it, you need to have a conversation at the mid-year point. It's really I appalls me if there's no conversation about performance at the mid-year point, and then you're going to go to the end and you're going to pay people against it. And the reason I think that's so appalling is because you're not really treating people fairly. There's a chance they're going to be surprised at the end, maybe pleasantly, but maybe not pleasantly. But it's a really good opportunity to go, oh, okay, you're nearly there, but if you just push it for the next 6 months, you're going to be even better. Right, so it's a really good opportunity to motivate high performance. So it's a missed window if we don't do that. If you are a business that needs to look at behaviours, values, competencies, I think this is quite a good time to do that as well. I mean, you could do it one of the other two, but if you want to look at performance in terms of behaviours, it means you're not talking about so much at the year end as well. So you could split it out in that way. And then finally, at the end of the third quarter, this is a great time to talk about talent and career conversations. Why now? Well, if you've got someone who's a high performer, they're doing really well, you want to be talking to them about, oh, okay, where do you want to go next year? What are your aspirations? You want them to feel that you value them and you're going to look at taking their career forwards, because that's a tool for retention, right? So again, having that, and these conversations, half hour, they're not massive. It could just be an extension on a one-to-one, but it's really nice because it's talking about talent and what they're doing really, really well. And actually, even if you've got somebody who's going to be slightly off on their objectives, they still be, they've got key skills. You might be looking for how they could perform in a different part of the organisation or in a different role. So having that as a dedicated conversation about that person is really key, I think, for employee engagement. And if you separate it out from the day-to-day, are you performing against your objectives, or let me rate your performance, it feels that that's a more genuine, just more authentic, showing that you value them conversation. So that's why I like pulling out the conversation in terms of, we said that people are more honest about developmental feedback. So that development and the career conversation, people are going to be more honest. Performance conversations, well, I'm not saying they're not they're dishonest, but it's like the performance conversations are very cleanly then about performance as about behavior. So by breaking things out in this way, it really can help you to have a higher quality, more engaging end year appraisal, because you've had many conversations already. You've reduced the likelihood of tick box. You can look at achievement in the future, but you've kind of just simply broken it all down. And it's simply and effective, and they've been talking all year round. But the managers were more likely to do that because they could see the purpose of those continuous check-ins, because each of those 4 had a specific focus. And hopefully that means it's going to be better quality. So the key points just to take away here. For me, if you're going to do development, link it to achievement of objectives, skills, or competencies. Make it relevant rather than, oh, just nice to have development. And absolutely, as Bally's saying, it should be adult. Hold people accountable for their own development. It's their career after all. I would encourage you to have early on meaningful conversations, start them early in the year. It does help if you've got real-time access and visibility to where people are. So from your point of view, if you want to help with development needs, and you've got a system where you can look at, month 4, they've all had their development reviews, you can go and have a look at that. And that's really helpful. Empower people, hold staff accountable for learning during one-to-one. So what have you done? We talked about this development. So how have you done this? Have you been and listened to that webinar? So coaching, managers should coach and empower and hold people accountable for learning. We want adults out there. Many people more work remotely than ever before, so they need to be managing themselves. I recommend, if you're going to do ratings or for development, so like 360 feedback, separate it from performance ratings. We've talked about that. If you are linking ratings to reward, think carefully about it. It's not actually the panacea, but you do need to include a moderation or calibration process if you're doing it. And also think about how your talent management processes, if you're going just continuous, think about how can you sit those behind it. And I say, if you've got a sort of month 9 is the focus on that, then that might make it easier. Oh, so So that sort of draws to conclusion. I feel like I've talked a lot there, so sorry about that. Thank you for those of you chatting as we've gone through it. I appreciate you chatting there. It felt there's quite a lot to explain. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions, do feel free to put any questions or suggestions in there. You can see here the next lot of webinars that are coming up. Oh, the Actus oversight is really only relevant for, well, at the moment it's relevant for financial services clients. It's a new module that we've got, which is to do something consumer duty. In fairness, it is an oversight tracking module. So smaller businesses that are trying to track KPIs might be interested in it, but we're gearing it at financial services. But then we're on to talent management on the 17th of July. We're taking a break for August, and then mastering organisational change in September. We'll send you the recording out. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you have a lovely rest of the day. Yeah, do kind of check in. And actually, if you've not been listening to the HR Uprising podcast recently, we've gone every other week now, but I'm doing a high performance HR Uprising series. So there's 10 of those. So some of these topics we're talking about, we've also got on the HR Uprising podcast. Thanks, guys. Really nice to have you join. Have a great day and rest of the week. Thanks, Steve. Keep an eye out.